The Hunt, released in 2012, stars Mads Mikkelsen. He's that dad in Rogue One, and the cock and ball torture guy in Casino Royale. And it features a kindergarten teacher accused of assaulting one of his students. And you watch as a patient man's life falls apart over the span of a few months due to a false accusation made by his best friend's daughter. And quickly, his entire community turns in on him, and you watch how a serious accusation can have harsh and drastic consequences. This is a sort of different type of movie for me. I just have never really seen one like it. However, I did like what this film did. I became invested in Matt's character and in ways began to root for him to overcome this terrible situation that he was in. However, at the same time, I don't necessarily feel like he helped himself much. He was very quiet and he kept on asking like what was said about him and who said it. And it kind of comes across as he's like trying to figure out who had done it. Kind of like he was going to cover his own tracks. And that's why I think that people were so quick to continue to accuse him. And on top of that, anybody that seemed to show any level of distrust, he became hyper offended by and threw them out of his life, including the English-speaking lady who he got jiggy with at the beginning of the film. There was also that scene where he walks in on the kind of group meeting with the principal and he kind of charges after her when she leaves. That doesn't seem like a good look. Personally, I don't think that was a right decision, but at the end of the day, it does portray a imperfect man kind of handling this thing that happened to him. The Hunt is a type of movie that leaves you sitting there feeling kind of frustrated and helpless against the scenarios of the film, and that's something that I think it does a really good job at doing. I kind of felt like things were unfair and kind of wrongly done. For example, the adults, they seem to just constantly validate the girl when confirming their suspicions, yet dismissed anything that proved otherwise, even from the same girl. And they would mention things like, well, she has a vivid imagination, and, you know, this is something that kids can just make up sometimes. However, they did not put things in a way that were even going to get either of the answers. It just seemed like it was leading every answer out of the girl. I kind of personally felt strong emotions towards this movie or during the movie because I myself have worked in a field involving children, and it is scary and risky to do so. Like, not to say that there's a gender difference, but especially as a man or as a guy. And I was like 15 when I started. However, you have to be hyper aware of every situation you are in with these kids and gain the parents' trust very quickly and their confidence. And on the flip side of that, the children, they grow to adore you and look up to everything that they see you do. And you have to end up establishing barriers at times just to keep those kids at a safe kind of space. And that's something that the man at the beginning of the movie didn't seem to do perfectly, even when, and if you've watched the movie, the girl tries to kiss him at the beginning and he responds in a way that was good. It wasn't great, but he tells her like, hey, you don't kiss people other than your mom and dad. And then he proceeds to never talk about that, even when things come up. And it's kind of why the girl became pissed off as well. And that was extremely aggravating because he never talks about it at all. And you would think that would be something that if you wanted to gain people's trust, you would come out with that very, very quickly. Even though to some degree it can kind of look like, to some level, admitting guilt. And with that being said, this movie, it did leave me just kind of, and I already don't really want to, but go into a field involving children like this because of how much risk is involved and how much, honestly, everything can implode just because of one accusation or another. And with that being said, I didn't think the movie was perfect. There was a few things that I didn't find super interesting, like the romance between him and the English-speaking woman. It just kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. And it was on the day of the whole debacle. And it just didn't seem to serve much of a purpose other than providing one more person who trusts him. And even then, when he kicks her out, she disappears for the entire middle portion and climax of the film and only shows up at the end when there was a few time skips. And last but not least, my conclusion on this film is that it's all kind of that girl's brother's fault. At the beginning of the movie, he and his friend, they were being mad obnoxious. I've never seen dudes act like that about porn. But they show her this thing, and they repeated a phrase that she then repeated about the teacher and led to the entire accusation. And then in turn ruined the entire man's life. And it was just stemmed from kind of what this boy said. And that's not saying that the professor or teacher did not do anything to not help the situation. However, on top of that, at the end of the movie, you kind of see him like looking angry at him at this like hunting thing for Danish people. And then at the end, they're all hunting and Mads gets shot at by somebody. And in the version that I was watching, he didn't get hit. And you kind of like look at the person up there. And I think it's obvious it's the kid. And it could be anybody in the town who still doesn't really trust him. However, I don't know, like it just kind of comes full circle, I guess. And I would say it was kind of his fault. He was the one who started it and the one who was the last to forgive it. And that just kind of sucks. But then on top of that, there's an alternate ending on, I guess, Blu-ray. I just looked this up and he gets hit and sounds like he gets shot in that moment. And that kind of just sucked. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was kind of the brother's fault. But overall, it was a good movie. It's, I think, Danish. I read the subtitles and it was overall pretty good. And I found it to be very interesting and thought-provoking. Hence why I'm making this video. But I would recommend it to other people. It's not the funnest movie to watch, but it's one that kind of like leaves you thinking and kind of invested in the story itself. But yeah, that's it.